Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our Blockchain Innovation Soccer of our Office for Financial Market Innovation and Digitalization. Welcome, Alejandro Vargas, and we'll start with the presentation soon. I just, as a matter of housekeeping, just inform you all that this webinar will be recorded. It will eventually be made available on our impulse-liechtenstein.li website under the media blog. And for the time being, also you can drop questions. We have a Q&A section. We prefer if you put the questions there and not in the chat, but we'll monitor both and to input your questions. And depending on the question, we will see whether we will put them in during the presentation already when the topics arise, or if we sum them all up at the end. In any event, Alejandro will give a presentation, and then that will be followed up with some Q&A. And well, the topic of today, don't be surprised, it's not a review or replay of last month's Blockchain Innovation Circle. It's really a different topic, even though it sounds quite similar. But we thought not just because MiCA and compliance is such a huge topic, but that we want to look at it from a different angle perspective. And this time, we want to look at it through the lens of artificial intelligence. So what could possibly go wrong? Everything that has AI written on it just sells like fresh bread, right? And but not just that, I believe it's great. And this is also the scope of our Blockchain Innovation Circle, as you all know, not just to make this a platform to give voice to experts and discuss what and how they are addressing current topics that are of interest for the whole industry and really relevant for the whole ecosystem and people active in this space. But also, I believe AI-driven compliance, what Alejandro is going to talk about is everything what he said beyond MiCA and navigating MiCA, and especially on to map actually the possibilities of what AI can do in that space. So what is actually possible, and where does that start and where does it end in a way. So I think that can give everyone a really good insight and perspective on what is possible in that space if you introduce and use AI on a very practical example and with the experience of our esteemed expert, Alejandro Vargas. So again, welcome, and would you do us the honor and pleasure to introduce yourself, where you're coming from, your professional background, and then, of course, what you're currently busy with Mooncheck and AI compliance in relating to MiCA. Welcome, Alejandro, again.
Great. Thank you so much, Clara. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate the invitation to discuss this topic. I think it's a super exciting topic. Discussing really AI in general. Like you said, the focus here is not really on MiCA alone. And as Clara just said, my name is Alejandro Vargas. I'm the co-founder of a platform called Mooncheck. And let me to introduce myself. Before I co-founded Mooncheck, I spent almost a decade practicing law to very large firms, Skadden and Davis Polk. I was actually practicing securities laws. So I worked on IPOs across several jurisdictions, which got me quite familiar with disclosure and sort of the expectations of regulators when it came to actually disclosing information and transparency. After I was a lawyer for that long, I fell in love with technology, and I co-founded an e-commerce platform called Lingual. And it was during really that time that I discovered my passion for using technology to solve complex problems. And about 2 years ago or so, I turned my attention to building with AI. And I was always a bit of a degen myself, loving crypto. And I decided, well, why don't we take AI and try to do something for the crypto space? And I think a lot of people will sort of appreciate where this comes from, because I think I had my fair share of losses that I attributed really to the lack of transparency in the space as well. And I realized that the lack of transparency in the space was really causing damage for regular individuals on a daily basis, and I wanted to do something about it. So Mooncheck was born out of the Hashed Entrepreneur in Residence program in Seoul. And we were also backed by the National University of Singapore and the Asian Institute of Digital Finance, research from that end in terms of AI and applications in fintech. So that's about me. And right now I want to sort of go into talking about AI. But one of the things that I want to sort of mention here is that this presentation is supposed to spark creativity and sort of make you think about the potential of AI. Is geared toward more regulators, but it has a lot of applicability as well to the projects in crypto. And a lot of the information that I will be talking about is based on a paper that Mooncheck co-authored with the AIDF, NUS, and the Abu Dhabi Global Markets, ADGM, in terms of how to apply AI to the regulation of Web3. So with that said, I wanted to talk first about what Mooncheck is doing in terms of AI applications. These do relate to MiCA. We decided first to tackle MiCA because we really believed that MiCA would be to crypto what GDPR was to the data privacy world. So we thought that it would have the most impact if we focused first on MiCA, and decided to create tools that not only allow projects to become compliant in the first instance with certain MiCA requirements, but also continued compliance for them to remain on the right side of the law on a continued basis with the help of AI. So the main tools that we built and we're building, one is the MiCA white paper generator. I'm not going to go into too much into detail on that, but the difference there between our MiCA white paper generator and others that you've actually heard of, even in this particular forum, is that we also have due diligence tools built into the MiCA white paper generator. So the system does due diligence just like a lawyer would in many ways, in order to be able to draft the white paper, not only from public data sources, but also from private data sources and conversations with key players within a project. And then we have a tool that alerts projects when the white paper needs to be updated. White papers, unlike much disclosure, it's almost like a live document that needs to be updated at all times whenever there's something material that happens that is not reflected in the white paper. So we decided to basically utilize the AI capabilities to track data for these projects and be able to tell them when perhaps something was not properly reflected in the white paper and it needed to be updated. We also are developing, and we're in the last stages of developing a marketing application that essentially allows the projects to comply with the MiCA marketing requirements, which are really twofold. One of them is that marketing should be aligned to really what the white paper says and kind of remain within the four corners of the white paper. But the other thing is that it shouldn't be misleading. And that's really kind of in line with pretty much all of securities regulation, very similar types of regulations in terms of not misleading the public for the sale of tokens. So that's one that we built. And then we have a social media radar where we just track social media accounts for projects and make sure that they're not saying stuff that also falls out of line with what should be said and what is compliant with MiCA. And the last thing that we have that is actually something that is very interesting for people when they look at it, they think it's quite fascinating, is that we have a smart contract disclosure monitor, which uses AI to read smart contracts for projects, and it tells projects when the smart contracts have not been properly disclosed in the white paper. So that's a bit of a different capability because we're basically using AI to read code, which is something that's a little bit more technically complicated than other things that we do. So there's certain regulatory challenges in Web3 that are very well known. One of them is the speed of innovation. It's extremely fast of a space, and regulators are having a hard time keeping up with that. So that's one of the problems, I think, in Web3 generally. And AI could potentially help solve some of those problems. Then there's the cross-jurisdictional complexities. Blockchain operates globally. There's no borders. That's the whole concept behind it. But regulations tend to be still very local. And that creates a problem not only with enforceability of regulations, but also with compliance for projects themselves, because they basically have to tackle an entire mountain of multi-jurisdictional regulations almost as soon as they go out the door with a particular project. And then we have also the lack of real-time oversight in the regulatory space. I mean, the blockchain space is a 24/7 space. It doesn't stop, it doesn't sleep. The markets are constantly busy, are constantly trading. And that also just generates a little bit of a problem for the regulatory space, especially when it comes to tackling things that might be real live problems that could lead to, big losses in markets and things like that. That ability to track that is actually quite difficult on the regulatory side. So why is AI sort of transforming all of this? There's a few reasons why. I mean, AI is able to process an incredibly large number of data points. And especially in a decentralized space where you have not only the on-chain data, but the off-chain data, AI is extremely good at being able to take in all of that amount of information and synthesize it properly for regulators to be able to understand it. Then you have the 24/7 monitoring capabilities, which goes it goes with what I just said before, which is the markets don't stop. Regulation and regulatory oversight should be nimble enough and quick enough to actually be able to pick up on things 24/7. And AI allows that to happen because it's machines and it's not humans, and you only need really a certain degree of human oversight beyond the AI. Then the third point is that it's extremely good. AI, a lot better than human beings at detecting patterns and anomalies. And this is not only simple patterns. This is patterns that would be extremely difficult for a human being to trace, because it's not only connecting close dots, it's connecting really far away dots by analyzing suspicious behavior that could be related to wallets or smart contract vulnerabilities that it's trying to basically detect in multiple places at the same time. A human being simply doesn't have that capability, but AI has shown to be very, very good at picking up on some of that. And the last thing is really that it's extremely adaptable and scalable. So again, not requiring humans to actually be able to accomplish some of these things. It makes the system very, very scalable, but it's also highly adaptable in the sense that as regulations change, the AI can be easily adapted to tackle the new regulations, and it can be almost live at the same time as regulations are coming in terms of adapting to them. So now moving on to just specific AI solutions in compliance. These are solutions that there's projects out there that are working on them. We are working on some of them as well, and I think it'll give you a bit of an idea of what AI is actually capable of. And I have to apologize because it's a very dense slide with a lot of information, a lot of points, and I want to try to walk through them as fast as possible and not bore you. But the first type of application is really applications that are focused on real-time transaction monitoring. AI continuously tracks blockchain transactions on chain. And if there's, for example, a sudden spike in transfers that is matching patterns that might be linked to money laundering activities, the AI can flag those transactions immediately, and it can give regulators that opportunity to intervene early on potential situations that are happening very live. The other thing that is like a cool set of applications that we're seeing is the anomaly and fraud detection. Is actually very similar in some sense, but it's really effective, the AI at identifying unusual trading patterns. So it can signal market manipulation quite well when it detects that there's collusion between, for example, multiple wallets that are trying to accomplish something. if you're seeing some sort of like wash trading happening and many parties engage in that type of wash trading, AI can actually detect relationships that are almost impossible for a human being to actually detect super early on. And we've seen that live in products where the patterns start forming extremely early on this type of activity, and it can tell you with a lot of certainty at a certain point very early on that this is something that is fishy happening with a particular token by tracking these types of transactions. The other thing that is super helpful for regulators as well, and actually also for projects, is the ability for AI to automate reporting and also generate alerts based on the reporting. So we're seeing the space probably transform by building systems that force basically projects to connect some of their documentation, and they also take the public data for projects, and they're able to produce real-time compliance reports for regulators. So without having to wait necessarily for reporting cycles. So whenever a particular regulator wants to have a compliance report for a particular topic of a project, they can easily request that from the AI, as long as the data sources are connected from these companies or projects. The AI is able to actually be able to do that pretty easily, and it obviously simplifies the process both for the regulator, but also for the projects that have to have the burden of the compliance reporting as well on a regular basis. So that's an area that we think it's pretty exciting and very doable, and we're seeing some of that happen. ADGM in particular is also thinking about having a platform where the VASPs can connect to that platform, and they upload a lot of documentation, and they have these requirements as to what needs to be there in order to be able to allow the AI to do these types of things. Then you have the smart contract review, which I talked a little bit about what Mooncheck is doing on the front, but the other place where it's incredibly helpful is in flagging potential security vulnerabilities. So it's not only for us, we're taking the view of like white paper and disclosure compliance, but one of the things that it can do very well is analyzing smart contracts and comparing those smart contracts to databases of known exploits. So you can detect essentially problematic code very early on and flag it. So for example, if an oracle or bridge has excessive permissions tied to it, the AI can detect that might be a common vulnerability that is attacked by hackers and raise that issue very early on. And that's a continuously evolving thing because the database can grow, and every time that there's a new type of vulnerability that is detected in the market, then that type of data gets inputted there. So then we can track with AI smart contracts as a whole to see which projects might have that type of vulnerability to try to shut that down pretty quickly. So very powerful, obviously, for a lot of types of losses that the crypto market has experienced where there's been exploitation of smart contract vulnerabilities. We think that there's going to be a lot of changes that are happening with AI on that front. Then you have the sort of the natural language processing capabilities that people are generally more familiar with in terms of AI because it's a ChatGPT type of thing. But what it's incredibly good at, the NLP, is to simplify complex documents. So, for example, audits that are very complex, even for a regulator to understand when they've been well written. It doesn't really matter. The ability for the AI to be able to simplify those documents and information and be able to identify the places where the most attention needs to be placed is really important in the regulatory realm. And so we're seeing a lot of work being done on that, and I'll talk about one of the pilots that we're working on as well on that front soon. And then you have something that I find particularly interesting as well, is the market sentiment analysis. And it's not really market sentiment, it might not be the best way to describe it, but it's really just social media and communications analysis. It's very useful for tracking public behavior. One of the things that I always posit as a lawyer and also as a founder is that a lot of fraud in the crypto space begins and happens through social media and through really qualitative data and not so much on-chain stuff. And so being able to monitor thousands of social media accounts and online forums for the mention of a specific token and how that token is being mentioned is really powerful, because again, the AI is able to start detecting patterns of behavior and coordinated efforts for example, pump and dump schemes that it would be impossible again for human beings to be able to do that on their own. And even being able to distinguish compromised accounts that are part of these systems and part of these efforts to really kind of scam people is something that AI is very, very good at doing. The next one is really the predictive analytics. AI is becoming better and better at predicting. And I think one of the things that we're going to see in the future is the ability to really kind of predict behavior more easily by AI. This is things like, for example, detecting, I don't know, unusual traffic spikes in DeFi protocol and matching patterns of that type of behavior to past hacks, and detecting that there might be a hack starting to happen in one of these protocols, just simply tracking behavior of how particular wallets are starting to interact with a protocol, for example. And then the last thing that AI is really, really good at, and I think this is something that is interesting and many people don't know, but AI is very good at scoring and prioritizing. So once you give it certain parameters, the AI is very good at giving a score to certain things. And so how this is helpful in the regulatory space is that it allows the AI to really kind of give a risk score to different instances of potential breaches of regulations. And by tracking those instances and logging those instances, it can start painting a picture when something starts forming into a much more serious situation with non-compliance. Of course, it can also track things that might be extremely high risk from the get-go, and it can flag those immediately. But what's more interesting is these smaller potential non-compliance situations that start building into something bigger. It's able to actually kind of detect that and make a picture out of that by prioritizing and scoring certain things. Now, I want to try to sort of get into a specific example of one of the regulatory applications that we have worked on a bit and thought about quite a bit. And I think it's something that's relatively easy to understand. So I want to walk you through this because it actually involves a lot of the elements that I discussed in the prior slide. So in this situation, you have an application that is meant to detect marketing anomalies under MiCA. So here you have essentially an AI that's parsing marketing channels and social media channels for a particular project, so a token, and monitoring everything that's happening online for that token. At the same time, the AI has some regulatory guidance. It has case law. It has certain parameters that we've decided to provide to the AI. And then it has the data that it starts collecting from the channels. So the AI starts essentially comparing that data and the data that is collected, every instance of marketing, to the regulatory guidance and the case law and the parameters we've given it, and it starts identifying violations. So there you have a bunch of tweets. There's one that is a potential violation. The AI then, as I said, is great at scoring, at risk scoring, and it can give it either a high risk score or a moderate risk score. In this case, it gives it a moderate risk score, and it still says, okay, this is enough. We've determined that this is enough to send an automated warning to a project. So the AI is able to actually draft the warning on its own, is able to actually explain why there's a potential violation of the law, and it can actually trigger that to be sent directly to the project. Now, if there's repeat violations or there's high-risk violations, what's happening every time that there's a potential violation, the AI is logging that violation, and little by little is starting to combine and analyze the frequency and risk of violations that are happening for a certain project. And once that kind of combination, that algorithm detects, okay, this is getting to a place where there should be potentially regulatory action or intervention or human intervention, it can actually send a notification to the regulator, and the regulator can receive a summary of all of that has been happening and the access to the actual log of those instances, so that a human can then go in and review that on their own. And the human can then decide whether or not to take regulatory action, or perhaps to ask the AI to just send another warning based on certain parameters. So this is obviously, this saves a ton of time for a regulator. And it still makes sure that the final regulatory actions are being taken by human beings, because obviously some of the arguments that we hear against AI are relate to due process, relate to biases, relate to certain things that AI can be, it's known to be problematic with. And so we definitely want that final call, at least at the moment, to be taken by a human being. And so it really relies on saving time on all the analysis and then passing information that's actionable to a regulator eventually. Now, talking a little bit about the pilots that ADGM is conducting and that we wrote about on the paper with them. One of them is the smart contract suitability assessment. And this, we've already talked a little bit about it, so I'm not going to spend too much time, but that particular pilot is really detecting the anomalies, the differences between white papers and disclosure, and what the projects have promised. So what the projects have promised versus what the smart contracts can actually do. I think what's interesting about this is basically how we do it. There's basically two types of methodologies that we combine in order to be able to do this. One of the methodologies is using an LLM-based validator that's interpreting the code of the smart contract and then validating that against the disclosure in the white paper to see if it's properly reflected in the white paper. So it's really the interpretation of the code and translating that into natural language to see if it's actually properly reflected in the white paper. But the second method actually is a bit more complex, where we almost reverse that process and we ask the AI to generate a code snippet based on something that is said on the white paper. So it's taking the other doing it in the other direction. And the AI actually can come up with code that tries to accomplish what the white paper says. And then that code is actually compared to the actual code of the project to see if, regardless of form, the functionality is the same and it can lead to the same result. And the AI is actually a lot more able to analyze whether the smart contract can actually do something if it also has another type of code that is supposed to accomplish that same goal, because it kind of realizes, oh, okay, this can be done this way and it can also be done that way. So we combine those two to be able to actually tell with a lot more certainty whether something in a white paper is incorrect. And then we have the whole thing about vulnerabilities, which is super powerful, and that's really just building that database of known vulnerabilities and exploit patterns, and making sure that we're looking at smart contracts as well and seeing if there's anything within those smart contracts that could lead us to believe that that there's a vulnerability there that needs to be tackled. Obviously, the value of pilots like these and the value of this type of stuff for regulators is that it allows regulators to do their job without being technical and without being engineers. And that's something that otherwise, at the moment, they're currently relying on external reports or a couple of people that understand this. But given the volume of things that are happening in a highly technological field, it's something that becomes impossible to do so. And they end up just cherry picking at things that they're more comfortable with, or just picking a few examples, when really these types of things have vulnerabilities, should be really looked at market-wide, especially in things like crypto. Now, the next pilot that we have is a security audit report assessment. And this is related to that simplification of audit reports that I mentioned. So these reports can be highly detailed and technical. And again, it comes to that, the regulators that are non-technical are going to have a hard time reading these reports, and many times even judging whether the reports are doing what they need to do. So what the system does is that it reads through the audit report and it like extracts the key findings, but it also starts identifying certain areas of risk and critical things, and it can start giving a risk score for those areas to then be able to prioritize the plan of attack for a regulator in terms of what things they need to really kind of worry about the most, or perhaps make sure that the project itself is aware of some of the higher risk areas that have been identified in the report. Then the AI can actually start suggesting remedial actions for each vulnerability that is found in the report. So it's also great because it simplifies that process for the regulator, where it tells them, hey, here's the problem areas, but here's what we think should be done in those problem areas. And you can start kind of having, again, a history. A lot of these reports might include that. They might include how you can actually solve certain problems, but some of them don't. And I think for the regulators to understand what is being suggested in terms of remedial actions, this is very, very important. And the other thing that the AI does with this is that it actually gives a score to the report itself. It basically says, hey, this report is good enough or not good enough, or it tells you exactly where there's gaps in the report that should be followed up on. So that's another thing that's important, because many times regulators and people are taking these audit reports at face value, and they're like, there's a score there, but do we know really what happened behind that report? Do we know exactly if there were any things that should have been touched upon? No, but the AI is actually capable of actually detecting that, giving a score to the report, and let a regulator know perhaps where they should do a bit more digging in terms of auditing. And sorry, I'm going to take a little sip of water. My voice is kind of running out.
Of course, take your time.
Yeah. So on the third pilot is smart due diligence. I think this one's very relatable and is sort of very easy to understand. But we think that both like virtual asset service providers, crypto asset service providers, whatever you want to call them in different places, they could also benefit from this type of functionality. Essentially, what we're trying to do is make sure that the AI can look at public data and also large databases, like due diligence databases, for example, of private data, and be able to sift through all of that information to bring up risks, negative press, potential past violations, potential sanctions, contracts that might seem a little fishy, contracts that might be with a sanctioned country or entity, essentially to start bringing different things to light from a set of documents and data. But the cooler part of this is that you can also feed a system like this a due diligence questionnaire. And it can basically go through that entire due diligence questionnaire that you have to create a report based on that due diligence questionnaire. Then based on that due diligence questionnaire, what we're also doing on our end is building an interface for the person to be able to essentially interact with the AI agent that's responsible for the due diligence, to be able to dig deeper and use natural language to ask follow-up questions on things that are coming up. So very much like you would do on ChatGPT, but very specifically with stuff that is being flagged about the project. And of course, this is not only a simple kind of retrieval augmented generation play for those of you who are familiar with AI. It's not just a vector database with these documents. Is a connection of that to the knowledge, to the legal knowledge, and the AI being able to detect problems in that data. And that's really the more challenging part in terms of the AI build, is the understanding of the law and be able to apply the law to certain scenarios that exist in these databases to be able to flag certain problems. Now, there are certain limitations in AI, at least right now, right? And so there are certain things that it cannot do well yet. And I want to flag those for people that are thinking that it can do absolutely everything. No, it cannot. And there's definitely limitations. One of them is that it's not great at financial analysis at the moment. This is This is changing. I mean, we're seeing models like O1 from OpenAI that are a lot better at doing calculations and doing actually very complex math, solving very complex math problems. But in crypto, it's not so much of a problem of doing the math, it's a problem of not having clear standards for financial reporting for these types of projects. And the lack of a particular standard just makes it almost impossible for the AI to be able to really determine what's happening with one of these projects. So that's more of the problem with the crypto space than anything else. Then the other thing is like the very nuanced contextual understanding of legal issues, those things where it's very subtle, the things that lawyers argue over that require a lot more thinking. They're things that the AI is not that good at doing at the moment. So there's subtleties in legal interpretations there that can vary a lot. And so while the AI can look at things and pull certain things, if you put that in front of a lawyer, the lawyer is going to detect certain things where the AI might be oversimplifying something or skipping something or not noticing a word here and there that actually makes a very big difference in the interpretation of something. So when it comes to that, the AI is not there yet. I think we're seeing more and more advancement on the front, and I would expect that to actually move relatively quickly. But I think we're still at a place where that part needs to be really tackled by a human being. And the other thing is also just about human behavior. It's highly unpredictable, and even though you can see past patterns of behavior, humans, like technology, can also adapt very quickly and be very creative in coming up with different ways of doing things. And so that unpredictability in human behavior is something that so far AI is not able to really predict that so well. Again, we also think that that's going to change in the future, but for now is something that it actually struggles with quite a bit. And the last thing is just keeping up with technology itself. I mean, AI moves with data. So anything that moves with data, it requires a lot of data to be able to do a good job. And so when you have emerging technologies and like things that are coming up where there isn't a lot of data as to how they actually work or how they do things, the AI is just going to have limitations in that sense. And that's something that in crypto is always going to be a problem, because if you have certain sort of methodologies of doing things in DeFi, for example, the AI is going to have a hard time doing the job of actually analyzing those things. It's probably just going to rely on making analogies and comparing it to more traditional financial methodologies of doing things to try to lead to a conclusion, but that obviously doesn't help, as we have seen also with regulators. You can't look at crypto the same way that you look at traditional markets in many, many ways. Now, I wanted to touch on very quickly, just for those who are a little bit curious about this stuff, in terms of how to tackle building AI applications in general, because I hear a lot of stuff about this, and there's so much misleading information about it. And this is a space that also moves so quickly that I thought that providing a little bit of guidance for anyone that's considering out there building these applications or hiring people to do this, there's certain things that you should probably know. One of them is that you should not jump directly into training an LLM. That doesn't make sense at the beginning. There's a lot that you can do by having separate agent workflows to accomplish certain goals connected to retrieval augmented generation architecture, which is called RAG. There's advanced RAG. You can combine it with traditional semantic searches and then doing re-ranking of what the AI is actually able to pull from these vector databases. So there's a lot that you can play with before you get to the point where you actually are going to think to train an LLM. And even then, you normally wouldn't even do that. You would just basically try to fine tune an existing LLM with a certain amount of data. So that's one thing. The other thing is just beware of one-shot prompting type of solutions, because they can actually produce really, really misleading and poor results. This is where the majority of large language models, the LLMs, struggle with, because they will tend to hallucinate quite a bit. And so if you don't have validation mechanisms along the way in these applications to make sure that what is being said is actually correct, and like loops of review, even with AI agents, to make things work better, you're going to get misleading things and things where the AI is not actually accurate. But a lot of people can prepare a demo for you that is very impressive with one-shot prompting to kind of get you to use them. So just be careful with that, because they can do things that are pretty impressive with just a basic LLM and simple prompts. The other thing is that you have to just be able to, keep up with advancements. It moves extremely quickly, and things that you were building today, in a week, they could be obsolete in the space at the moment. So just make sure that the people that you're working with actually have a bit of an ear to the ground in terms of that. And then the last point is that, I would say, and sorry, I realize that there's another 3 there, but it should be a 4. The fourth point is that you should be careful with so many snake oil sellers in AI. Anybody that's telling you that they've trained an LLM for a simple task, it's probably not being 100% truthful. And I think you just have to be a little bit careful with some of that, because people love the buzzwords at the moment, and there's a lot of that happening. Very quickly, and I'm reaching kind of the end because I want to leave some time for Q&A, but the future looks pretty incredible when it comes to AI applications and the regulatory space. One of the areas that I mentioned that we think is definitely going to happen is more on the predictive analytics. So the AI is really becoming a lot more advanced in forecasting potential issues before they even happen. That ability to analyze historical patterns and current activities is allowing AI to detect very early on when something's happening. And so it will, I think, allow a lot of proactive regulation as opposed to reactive regulation in this space, especially with the automation of being able to, for example, shut down certain things automatically, shut down the interaction of certain wallets with certain systems automatically. So all of that, I think, is going to be pretty interesting once we see more work in AI done. The other thing is obviously what people are talking about, and I know that some people kind of hate the term because it makes it a little bit too sci-fi, but it's the idea of artificial general intelligence, which is AGI, which is really when the AI has reached a point where it can do better than a PhD at most tasks. What is important about that, and what we're seeing in the AI space as being the biggest game changer with that happening, and also with AI agents essentially generally, is that they can start becoming decision makers, and they can automate decisions and directions that they go into themselves. And that's, I think, where it really kind of changes the game, because it allows, once you allow an AI to start making decisions, they're able to even choose how they change certain tools themselves in order to be able to perform better at something. So a lot of the stuff that we do right now manually, or be able to understand which data and implement the data in a certain way that we do manually right now with AI, or pseudo manually, will be actually replaced by AI, and the activities and the whole process is going to be basically taken care of by these AIs that can actually start making decisions. And eventually, I mean, once the regulators sort of allow it, they can start making decisions even on behalf of regulators once they trust in these systems. And then the dynamic adaptation of AI is also what I was sort of referring to, because the AI is going to be able to adapt immediately to changing regulations. The moment you have, for example, a court decision that is published, the AI is going to be able to immediately incorporate that into its data and be able to adjust the entire process on its own as to how that's actually going to affect the way it regulates players in the space. So that's also pretty cool. And then the other thing that is really important, I think, from also like a regulatory standpoint, a regulator standpoint more than anything, and also a due diligence standpoint, is really this thing that's called XAI, which is explainable AI, where AI starts really explaining absolutely everything it does and why it does it. so that there's really a log there that somebody can look into and a regulator can look into and say, no, the thought process here is the correct thought process, and it makes sense what they're doing, so that whenever somebody that's the subject of regulation, can check to see whether there was unfair play, and regulators also have a log of how this decision was made, clearly with explaining exactly what was being done by the AI by itself. So yeah, I think I'm gonna look on Mooncheck's vision. That's basically it on all of the AI stuff. That's a bit more dense. On Mooncheck's vision for the future that I wanted to touch on is really that we want to empower the projects to be compliant. It's really about simplifying this process of compliance so that they can thrive, right? So that we can see all of this amazing creativity in technology kind of come to life without these projects actually having to think about more of the regulatory side of things. And we're just believers in good intent. We believe that the majority of projects out there, they don't have any malice. They're not trying to really do things that breach the law in any shape or form. It's just that they don't know better, and solutions that can help them accomplish those goals of compliance, I think, are what should be happening at the moment to allow the space to really focus on creation and really allowing technology to thrive as it should be. And that's why I wanted to leave you in this last slide with this thought, and I'll open it up for questions for anybody out there that is curious about what I just talked about. And sorry, I know it was dense, a lot of information, but hopefully informative.
Well, thank you so much, Alejandro. That was really amazing. I mean, an outstanding presentation. And in my opinion, I've really hardly heard that topic being presented so tangible, understandable, and also striking that balance between big picture and zeroing in and zooming in on the also technical details, but yet still make them understandable in a almost not technical and for me it's super understandable and an amazing way. So thank you so much for that. It was really outstanding. So
thank you, Claire. Thank you.
Really fantastic. And also fantastic what you are doing with Mooncheck. So when you were speaking about the pilots, I'm just wondering, or my first question would be like, how mature are these pilots? What is your target group, where you're at in going to market and bringing that solution out there?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The pilots actually that are discussed are more work that is being done with a GGM at the moment, and we are more collaborating on the idea side. Also, one of the co-founders of Mooncheck is working internally at ADGM in this particular department, trying to deploy some of these pilots internally for them. They're at early stages within ADGM, but we have already at Mooncheck done a lot of work that is very, very relevant to those pilots. So technology that we have already built at Mooncheck is just being sort of repurposed right now in order to be able to do this with the uniqueness of what they need at the regulator side at ADGM. And to be honest, for us at Mooncheck, it's not, we don't, and I don't know how to put this. We love regulators and we interact with them all the time, as you know, and we want to hear from them. But at the same time, we are more focused on providing the tools for the crypto projects and making sure that regulators understand what those tools are, so they become more accepting of these tools being used for compliance. Because I think that's part of the problem. Yes, we could actually take these tools like we're doing with ADGM and flip them over very easily, actually, to accomplish a role for the regulators. But I think for us, we just want to make sure that we're a friend of the crypto space in that sense. And of course, we're gonna collaborate with regulators and give them ideas, but we're not really building those tools directly for regulators ourselves. Yeah,
that's amazing. And so what are you looking for now in the next step? More other regulators to talk to, or more projects, users? What are you looking for?
Yeah, for us, we would love to have more projects to involve in our pilot, because I think for us, we have these tools. The majority of them are completed with some sort of very near completion where we can start actually using them for actual projects to be able to really kind of pilot the tools. So we would love to be able to have more projects that use our tools so we can gather more data and improve a little bit more of the AI output with this. That's where we're at right now. We've built already prototypes for pretty much all of them. We're now past the prototype stage into more of the MVP stage for them, but we really want to have a period of time where we have different projects involved in utilizing the tools with us. So we would, yeah, I mean, we would invite any project that's listening to this presentation to get in touch, because you would be able to work with us in also helping you become compliant with some MiCA stuff that's coming up, including the white paper, and we would be kind of walking you through that while allowing the AI to also do its job, but making sure that you're getting also advice from us directly. So it's kind of a good opportunity, I think, for projects to be able to do that.
Sounds amazing. Are you looking for projects within certain jurisdictions? So as you said, starting with MiCA, that they should be EU, EEA focused, or are you also looking into other jurisdictions and other?
You know, we think so. We are open to any jurisdiction because we actually think that the majority of projects in any jurisdiction are still going to have to comply with MiCA. And so we would welcome any project that is looking at having their tokens listed or traded in the EU, which could be anywhere really. And one of the things that I want to say is that, you know, our focus, the white paper generation side, we know that there's going to be many solutions out there for white paper generation, and we want to offer that eventually just for free to projects. The key for us, and where we really think it's more interesting to us, is really the ongoing compliance things, because that's where the monitoring functions that I've been discussing as well in the presentation become critical, which we find a lot more exciting from a technology standpoint, and more value, because I think having the white paper is a one-shot thing. You can write a white paper, but the thing that is more challenging for projects is how do you continue to make sure you're actually compliant with MiCA on an ongoing basis when there's so many things going on. And that's sort of where we want to make a difference, and where we would actually just love to have some projects test this out with their social media and all that stuff. Yeah.
Great. Another, for me, least obvious question, since we are also dealing with the EU AI Act and its implementation also in Liechtenstein. I was wondering how is your solution compatible, or what are you doing to be compatible with the AI Act? Is it a challenge? Is that a problem for Mooncheck, for you?
So we don't see it too much of a problem yet at the moment. We think that our solution it's kind of falling along the lines of things where it's not making certain types of decisions. It's not it sort of condenses information and it presents it in a certain way, but it's not actually being used for certain decision making that I think would put us at risk. So yes, while it's something that I'm keeping an eye on, I don't think solutions like ours are really kind of the target, especially because of the way that we're presenting information. We're not really allowing projects also to do a lot with the AI. It's almost like an AI-led process. It's almost like having analytics in the background of and then sort of presenting things in dashboard type of format with very little proper interaction or being able to push the AI in a certain direction or another, because we're not really providing that type of interface as well. It's really more for data analytics and then presenting things to projects that we're using the AI.
Wow, understood. And from your experience, I mean, of course, it's still early in the game for you guys. What is your experience? What is the solution or the challenge that you are addressing that is actually generating the most aha moment, or where they're saying, oh, this is something that we were really looking for. So what is, like, from your customer experience, from the customer side, the killer feature that even probably might be surprising you, or that you thought, oh, this is so cool, we're so excited about that, and then the market or the users are saying, wow, this is actually something that we were looking for. What is your experience, the feedback so far?
Yeah, I think the most would be so we have a compliance dashboard in essence, which is more of the ongoing compliance tools. And of the tools that I listed there, I think the ones that are most interesting to people are the ones that are tracking all of the activity of projects and sort of risk scoring all of the different activities to allow someone to come and take a look at the risk profile of a particular channel, of the types of statements that are being said, the things that are potentially being problematic. That's sort of where the most attention has been. But the other thing is that so our next step in the roadmap, which we've also talked to a lot of people about and a lot of projects about, is that we're trying to develop bots for both Discord and Telegram to remove the communication function from the hands of mods that might not be so familiar as to how they should be communicating with things. Because once you have this amount of data on this end that we collect and we have, then we can create bots that are on the right side of the law in terms of what they say and how they say it, and respond to the public in a way that's safe. And even if it's not directly, to the public, at least having those tools for the mods themselves to be able to know exactly what to say and what they can't say, because there's a lot of instances of non-compliance that we can see happening in these groups, because these mods can be these 19-year-old kids essentially shilling a token, and they think that they have to kind of say everything a certain way, whereas some of the questions can be pretty tricky to respond to. So that's another thing that I think is an important feature for us.
Fantastic. Well, I would have actually so many more questions, but we haven't had any questions so far from the audience, and also our time has been running out. So I would say we'll take the other following up questions offline and discuss that at our next meeting. Okay, but so far, I just want to thank also the audience for your patience and being here with us, and your time. Just a quick save the date. The next Blockchain Innovation Circle is going to take place on the 19th of November, same time, 1:30 p.m. Central European Time. And we will announce the topic and experts in due course, as soon as possible, obviously, but at least save the date and join us again for the next BIC. And Alejandro, really a heartfelt thank you for your time and expertise and sharing that with us. That was really amazing. And I think it's great to have that also recorded and have that accessible for other people, because it's certainly a topic that is gaining more and more traction and attention, rightfully so. And it's so important. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And it's been true honor, a pleasure having you here. And yeah, I really
Clara.
appreciate also, it's so great the work you're doing with Mooncheck. And yeah. So thank you for all of that, and we'll be talking soon. And for all you guys, thank you so much for joining. Wishing you a nice afternoon, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you, Alejandro.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.